Welcome to class where we're going to break down, or I just said I wasn't going to break down. We're going to talk about how I studied the skull. Thanks for coming. I'm going to start with you guys. What have you tried for learning the skull and how has it worked for you?
Um, I haven't really studied it just yet, but happy to listen.
You haven't, but you might. Okay. The main thing for me is to get the general form and then look at the certain prominent anatomy landmarks. Yeah, that's a good strategy. I think that's true. I think this is going to be similar to what I'm doing tonight. Let me just check something real quick. Something came up. Okay. I'm not going to mess with that anymore. Sorry about that. And then I carve into the form like how we discussed a while ago. Yeah. So, what I'm going to talk about today is my approach for studying the skull. This is not my approach for drawing the skull, because when I'm drawing the skull, I'm just drawing the skull. I'm not thinking in a step-by-step approach. So you've probably seen lots of tutorials where it's like draw a circle, then draw a line on the circle, then draw another circle, and then a line across the circle. Like Loomis method stuff like that. There's lots of stuff out there like this, and it can be useful, but I think it falls short in a couple ways. The first is that they require some prerequisite skills of being able to draw forms well, otherwise, it doesn't work, and that confuses a lot of people who don't know that. The other problem is that even if you can do this right, you get to this part. There's always a part in these, usually it's somewhere around here. Maybe I have a line for the nose and a line for the mouth, but you always get to draw the rest of the fucking owl part, where how do I go from this to a skull? And in the tutorial, it looks easy. It's like, okay, you have this, then you draw on the eye sockets and the nose and the mouth and all that stuff. And cool, that looks easy. And then you try it and you don't actually know what the eye sockets look like, what the mouth parts looks like, because you haven't really studied it yet. Unless you have, in which case you don't really need these kind of tutorials. So the way I study the skull is, and not just the skull, I'm going to use the skull as an example today, but this is how I study most subjects, just in general, or one of the ways I study subjects in general, is as much as possible, I want to study from real subjects. So I don't know how well you can see this. I have this plastic skull here that I got at an art supply store for like 12 bucks. Fantastic purchase that I used to study the skull. That's not great for live streaming because you won't be able to see it as well. So I have a 3D model at Sketchfab that I found on sketchfab.com, which is a fantastic site to find 3D references. So I'll be using that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing it from imagination and then using that 3D model to check my work. Now, this will work better if you've already done a few drawings of the skull. So you have some idea of what you're doing. Like going from maybe never having drawn a skull to trying to draw one from imagination is going to be frustrating. But I'm going to start with a box. And at this point, it's worth mentioning that there's a bit of prerequisites to what I'm doing here. And that is, I'm going to do this lecture assuming a certain amount of drawing fundamental skill. Even if you don't have that skill yet, this will hopefully still be useful to you as kind of a proof of what you can do when you do have those skills. And the prerequisite is drawing basic forms from imagination, like this box, and being able to draw from observation. So if you had a skull in front of you, like this plastic guy here, would you be able to draw it convincingly? So if you can't do either of those things, hello? If you can't do any of those things yet, being able to draw decently from observation and being able to draw forms from your imagination, basic forms from your imagination, this study method is going to be a lot more difficult and might not work as well for you. With those being out of the way, I like to caveat with those things to avoid as much as possible my videos becoming draw the rest of the fucking owl kind of tutorials where you get to a point and you realize you don't know what you're doing. And now I'm just going to draw the skull from my imagination. And I'm starting with the larger forms. I don't have to, but I like to, kind of for design reasons as much as anything else. Like I can start with the smaller forms and build out, but I think it looks better. And just personally, I like to consider larger shapes first. By the way, just some live stream housekeeping. When I teach in real life, I can see everybody's faces and I can see if people raise their hand. And that gives me feedback on when to stop talking and if people are getting stuff or not. But I don't get that on a live stream. So if you're confused or if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. I don't have the social cue to know to stop talking. So otherwise I will, and if you wait for me to stop talking, it might be a while. So otherwise I might miss your question. And the whole reason I want to do these live is so I can make them interactive and get your questions. So here is my skull from imagination. There's details. I could add those, but I'm not worried about details right now. Partly to keep these demos from going too long. And partly because if you can do this, you can do the details. Like teeth and stuff. I don't want to draw teeth tonight. Maybe towards the end. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to position the skull at the same or similar angle to the one I drew, and I'm going to use this to check my work. A big reason why I did the box, it helps me establish the perspective, but more importantly for this exercise, it establishes the perspective that I'm trying to go for before I start drawing so that I can compare, when I compare my reference, I know what angle to put it at. So the skull I drew is a bit wider, just in general. And I'm going to correct this anyway, but that's not necessarily wrong. So I'm not trying to match the model exactly. I'm just using it to give myself feedback. Because some people have wider skulls. Some people have narrower skulls. It's just how it works. But the forms are going to more or less be... They're going to have the same forms even if their proportions are different. Pausing to read. I like the study method. I notice how many people draw something, but they don't seem to analyze and compare with the actual reference and simply move on. I think it makes it difficult to truly learn. Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the biggest things that holds artists back And I was definitely guilty of this for a long time, is just not knowing what stuff looks like. And it's, it's fine if you want to do something more fictional, and you can like use design choices instead of realism, but if you want to be realistic, you should know what stuff looks like. And the way to know what stuff looks like is to look at it and do studies of it. So there we go. And I will try a different angle, because that's the strength of this method to me, is that I can do a bunch of different angles. I'll do something more straight on and then a little bit more down. One of the limitations of the 3D model on Sketchfab is I can't rotate it with as much precision as I can if with the actual plastic model. Like, there's certain angles I can't get, but it's fine for this kind of thing. And this time I'm going to start with the details just to prove that I can, because I don't want you to think that the method is to draw this and then some lines and then oh, that was terrible. But to draw some lines and then draw the details on top of that. I like to do that for design reasons, as I explained, but I don't have to. So I can just go right into the details, because the information that I'm drawing from, I've internalized this through practicing this exercise a lot. And that doesn't mean I'm going to get it perfect every time, but that does mean that I have a pretty general idea of what these forms look like, and I can recall them as I'm drawing. Maybe that's a little too much chin. But every time I repeat this, every time I draw a skull and then I check it, I'm refining the mental model I have in my mind of what the skull looks like and getting it to be more complete and more accurate. When I make mistakes, that gives me an opportunity to see where my mental model is wrong. And when I was learning this stuff, I would try drawing from a certain angle and realize I don't actually know what it looks like from that angle. And then I would have to go to the source and find the information that I'm missing. So yeah, based on this one, it looks like I was pretty accurate. I could bring the jaw in a little bit on the side, and the cranium as well. This guy's more scowly than mine is. He's a mean skull. My skull's friendlier, so I'm not gonna do the brow ridge quite as much. And less jaw on this side as well. I notice how you imply the teeth area, basically by using a contour line based on how it's angled. I totally forgot to do that with teeth when studying the skull myself. Yeah, it's this is to me this is kind of a necessity because I'm maybe not a necessity, but I would not want to start doing this and then just have to stop in the middle and draw every tooth. There's a bunch of them, and might cover the teeth during this lesson, but you could also just get a skull and study them for yourself. You don't need me to explain. This is the explain which ones are the incisors and the bicuspids and all that good stuff. Um, so the point of this is that you keep repeating this process of drawing the skull from different angles until you really understand its form. Because you have the information and you're bringing it into your mind by repeated exposure. Another thing to keep in mind with the box is that the box is not there to establish the proportions. It's there to establish the perspective. So there's definitely times when I'm drawing these and I run out of room in the box. That means my box is wrong, not my skull. Because trying to get the proportions of something without getting into its details like this, or without thinking about the subject, just thinking about its proportions abstractly in space, I find it really difficult. So I don't try to do that. I just establish the perspective overall. And then I should follow that perspective. The point about using a box only to establish the perspective is useful and overlooked, I think. Some people use the actual box itself to create the anatomically correct skull, for example. Yeah, I think we were talking about this on the Discord earlier with Rob and somebody else, who unfortunately is not here because I think she would have really benefited from this. But the a lot of times like in the tutorials you find on the internet, it's draw boxes, then break things down into boxes, and then there's like this missing. This is the definitely a draw the rest of the fucking owl moment where it's like, okay, I drew these boxes, but it doesn't look like a skull. Now what? And I don't think the point of drawing boxes is to turn everything into boxes. I think it's to establish perspective and form. And then you use your establishment of perspective and form to draw the other stuff that you do with like the actual thing. And you do that by knowing what things look like and then using observational skills. And I'm not following my own perspective. I'm always weary of drawing methods. I'm not leery, that's the word, not weary. Leery of drawing methods. I'm not leery of study methods because I think those can help. And drawing methods are not they're not without their uses. I teach drawing methods too, but I teach them as teaching tools rather than this is how you're supposed to draw. Because how you're supposed to draw is whatever works. And looking for methods can distract from finding what actually works through trial and error, just drawing until the drawing looks the way they're supposed to. Um, I think a lot of artists, especially on the internet, get lost in the sauce trying to find the right method. Like, should I use the robo bean? Should I draw boxes? Should I do this mannequin or that mannequin? And It's not, none of them are going to give you all the answers. The answers always, always, always come from drawing, not from learning about drawing, reading about drawing, or theories about drawing. And I'm big on theories about drawing. I really like them, but the answers come from drawing. So yeah, this guy was pretty close. And notice that I haven't talked about simplifications very much, besides some of the issues with them. You're so right. I remember that I used to only take notes and memorize stuff about art, but never actually drew anything to actually improve my skills. Yeah, it's an unfortunate beginner trap. So at this point, you'll notice I haven't mentioned anything about simplification. And this is because I prefer to use simplifications after I learn the actual subject that they're simplifying, not before. So instead of learning the Loomis method and then the skull, I'm going to learn the skull and then I'm going to look at various ways to simplify it. Because I think it's much easier to, I think the simplifications are much more useful when you understand what you're including and what you're not including. And it's a choice rather than you just simply don't know that things are there that you're leaving out. So I've kind of come up with my own simplification for the skull, and I don't do it, and I'm not gonna like tell you about how I simplify because I don't. I want you to figure it out the way I did by drawing the thing. So yeah, like it is pretty similar to the Loomis method, but one of the things is this flat area on the jaw that I noticed. Um, and like, what is a simplification? What parts are simplifications and what aren't? Hard to say. Simplifying the mouth area into like a half sphere is a big one for me because it's very easy to get lost in the details of the teeth. And then sometimes, especially when I'm teaching the chin, I like to, or teaching the skull, I like to use a flat, really to simplify the flat plane on the front. In reality, it's not flat, but it helps to visualize the jaw. I like to simplify it into three parts. So if you're looking at it from the top, there's the chin, and then there's the flat part on the side that goes up into the joint, the temporomandibular joint, and then there's the curved part that connects the two of them. But I didn't come to this simplification through a tutorial. I came to this simplification through drawing skulls and noticing patterns. All right. And Let's check my work again. I don't think I'm actually going to be able to get the model to that angle. Nah, I really can't. Because I can't tilt it on the z-axis. Um, well, that one's going to have to go unchecked. You could take a picture with a phone maybe and send it to yourself over Discord. Yeah, of the skull. I don't want to slow down the thing that much. Because I think you guys get the idea of what I'm doing here by drawing and checking the skull. That if I miss a single one of them, I don't think it's that much of a problem for the lecture if I can't check all of it. Because eyeball test, I think this one looks pretty good. The jaw might be a little bit weird, but whatever. I didn't match my perspective exactly. So the next point that I want to make is this is a process for learning. When you want to internalize this later, then you start stripping away the external information. So when you start, you don't know any of this, so you need like this. If this is internal, external. So when you start, it's mostly or all external, like you need lots of information from your models and stuff, and you start to transfer that over. And later on in the study process, it becomes more internal and less external. So what I mean by that is later on, like right now, this is all fresh in my head because I've just been drawing it, but later on, I want to use spaced repetition and test myself on what I've learned and how much of it is actually stuck. So later on, I would draw a skull with none of the other reference, get rid of everything else. And I mean, this doesn't count because it's still fresh in my mind, but like, if I was learning this, then tonight I would sit with my sketchbook and no model and just try to draw what I learned during the day or maybe tomorrow at some point. Just have some time pass so it's not fresh in my mind anymore. And then I will test myself to see how much of it's stuck. And I might notice that maybe from this angle, I don't know what this area is supposed to look like. Like I know there's this guy, and then the jaw comes somewhere. Is it here? Is it more at this angle? Or is it curved up like this? Is it out like this? Maybe I can't remember. And I would make notes of this, either physically write it on the paper or just mental notes like, hey, I'm not sure about this area. And then the next time I study, I'm going to make sure I focus on that and get that missing information back into my mind. And the more you repeat this, the more of it sticks over time. The other thing that will happen is when you're drawing without the reference handy, you'll start to make it your own. Like the way I draw the skull, it doesn't match the model in a lot of ways because first of all, I didn't learn from that model, but second of all, just because I've internalized it and I'm doing it my way. And then you start playing with it. You start doing more design and less just strictly recall. And that's when it's really internalized and deep. And then it's just part of how you draw. It's not permanent. You have to you have to keep doing it. If I stopped drawing skulls for a long time, I would lose some of this information and I'd have to get it back if I wanted to draw skulls for my head again. But it would be easier the second time because I know how I've done it. Would you say then that this is your style when it comes to drawing skulls? Since I feel like you're probably subconsciously using elements that look good to you. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean when I'm talking about internalizing. I'm talking about bringing it in to the way you draw and your design choices. And it's not entirely subconscious either. Um, like simplifying the side of the jaw like that, that is a conscious design choice that I've done when internalizing it. Um, I like to really draw attention to the temple area. Not every artist does that. It's not more correct to make sure that the temple is really clear. It's just how I like to do it. Okay, bring the rest of this back. So we're going quicker than I did in the lesson last or this morning. Um, why don't I take a breath and give you guys a chance to do some talking or typing? If you have any thoughts or anything or any questions. Would you say this kind of study method works well for more chaotic elements such as hair, since there are structural elements and there's a lot of variation? Yeah, that's a really good question. I do find less fixed elements to be a bit tougher with this method. Um, for something like hair, I wouldn't be able to. I mean, I don't know if I could find a 3D model of hair, and it would have to be more specific and less like hair in general. Like I would look at a certain hairstyle and learn that, and then move on to a different one instead of just like hair as a general concept. But yeah, it does this, like everything else, it has its limitations. I would also say that this isn't supposed to be totalizing, as in like this isn't the way I learn everything all the time. It's just it's just a tool. It's a very useful tool. I use it a lot, but there are other ways to learn things, and if I start getting into those, we'll veer off into the weeds in a way that I really don't want to. Plus, I want to save stuff for other lectures. So, do you use visual memory more to draw skulls, or is there a method or style you prefer for skulls? Um, huh. I'm not sure what the difference is because, well, okay, the method part. yeah, I use visual memory, not um, not any method. Like I do like to start with the eye sockets. That just feels more natural to me. I think they establish the perspective well, but I don't use a method like I draw this part, then I draw this part, then I draw this part. It's more, yeah, I rely on the visual memory. Um, when it comes to style, I don't think that those two things are opposed. So, for example, if I want to draw a skull and I want to stylize its shape more, so I'll do one that's really like boxy. And very stylized. So am I relying on style or visual memory here? I would say both. That I'm using my visual memory, but also stylizing it as I draw. I wasn't planning on drawing a boxy skull like that, but I kind of like this guy. Fun stuff happens when you just experiment and let it happen. Does that answer your question? Hopefully that person's still here. I can't tell on the YouTube chat. I often find that I try to draw from imagination or visual memory, but end up doing the same style in the same position. Yeah, I do too. Um, it's I think it's pretty natural to default to the things you know. Um, when you're doing and like I'm very much doing that right now. Like I I've drawn skulls a lot of times and I'm doing them from angles I'm pretty comfortable with tonight. I'm just comfortable with like a lot of angles because I've done this a lot. Um, yeah, it's easier to do things you're already familiar with. It takes mental effort to like force yourself out of it sometimes to do something. And then when you do a style you're not used to, and subject matters you're not used to, it's more likely it's gonna be weird looking or bad. It's just that's how it goes when you experiment, which isn't a bad thing. Um, it's just part of the process, but it doesn't feel as good as like just nailing it, doing something you know. At least not usually. Okay, we got time, so why don't I talk about teeth? Because this is one of the things. One of the things about this model method is you have to try to verify your models. I use Sketchfab a lot. I also have an anatomy app on my phone. It's called Anatomy for the Artist or something like that. You with Sketchfab, they let anybody upload stuff. You know, it's the YouTube of 3D models. So some models are going to be better than others in terms of their design choices, in terms of their accuracy. So you want to try to verify this stuff based on anatomy textbooks and stuff like that. Granted, the models are always going to be a bit different, and being different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but you want to look through stuff. Um, so this model, I don't think the teeth are very well done. They're not terrible, but they're all look pretty similar. I like to differentiate the teeth a little bit. I think it's more visually interesting. So, starting in the front, on the top teeth, we have incisors. Those are the two front teeth, chipmunk teeth. And then there are two smaller incisors next to those. Next to the incisors are the canines. These are fun. They're pointy. I like to exaggerate them. Hopefully, not too much that they look like vampires every time, but they're fun. Next to the incisors are the bicuspids. These have properties of both the canine and the molars. So the canine is pointy. The molars are wide and rounded. The bicuspid is wide and like blunted pointy. Then next to those are the molars, and at this point, because looking down, the it's like a semicircle, the teeth start to round away, and this is where the molars are. And I don't draw molars a lot because they're usually hidden behind other stuff. Like if you're drawing a face and not a skull, you're definitely going to the molars are definitely going to be hidden behind the cheeks unless the mouth is like crazy wide open. And then on the bottom, same thing. Inside four incisors, they're smaller. The canines, then the bicuspids as things start to curve around, and there you get the teeth. When people draw teeth for illustrations, is it true that you should draw them more so together as a large form than each separately? I heard it can look uncanny. Yeah, that is a design choice I tend to agree with. It like design choices aren't right or wrong, but um, drawing every tooth is usually going to draw a lot of attention, or not usually, it's always going to draw a lot of attention to the teeth. The more details you put on something, the more visual weight it will have. Um, and unless you're making something for a dentist or something, you probably don't want the teeth, or like it's a vampire or like a wolf man with really cool teeth. You probably don't want the teeth to be drawing a lot of attention to them. So yeah, that's why a lot of times when I'm drawing teeth, just kind of like a general shape, the shadows on the top and bottom, and those they get closer together to hint at that roundness. But yeah, something like that. It looks weird on its own, but in the context of the rest of the face where you don't want to look at teeth, it will look better. Anyway, so we're getting further than I got in the other lecture. So why don't I go a little further today? Actually, before I do that, let's talk a bit about these lectures in these free classes in general, especially for the new people on YouTube. I have no idea how many people are watching on YouTube. I can't see that number the way I have this set up. I know at least one of you is new on Discord. So these free lectures are not a course. There, like in a course, there would be assignments, there would be feedback, and it would be like you would do the assignments, you would come in the next time, you'd get feedback, and you would build. build the skills from there. So like I would assign you to do a certain amount of skulls, and then I would give you feedback on those skulls the next time I saw you. But that's not really feasible for these kind of things because I want these to be one-offs where someone can come in at any time. But I do have some courses, or I have a course in the works, so stick around for that. Um, so yeah, these are one-offs. I think that's all I wanted to say about that in general. After I finish the skull, so I'm gonna do another one same time next week, or another two, I guess. Same time next week, same lecture, two times for people in different time zones. But it's not going. They relate in that they all follow in the same teaching philosophy, but they're not building on each other. There's no homework. There's no assignments. Do you already know what subject matter you'll cover next week, or do you determine a couple days beforehand? I'm not 100% decided, but I'm like 90% sure what I'm going to do next week. I'm thinking I'm going to do um, a lecture about composition and referencing and how you organize information within a within a piece, because I think that ties in somewhat nicely with this. Composition, super fun, sweet. Yeah, I really like talking about composition. I think it's an underratedly discussed subject. Um, so before we wrap, composition feels really abstract at times, so I look forward to it. Yeah, there's different ways to look at composition. The one I'm going to talk about next week, I think, is the more concrete way of looking at it. Hopefully that will help. So before I wrap, I want to talk about heads, and because I talked about how I don't use methods, and I don't really use methods with heads either, but I like to, because I know what the skull looks like, I like to kind of rough in the general shape of the skull before I start drawing the features. So, like, I have the eye sockets, the nose, the jawline, and the cranium. And then I would use that as a base to start drawing the features. And it's not quite an abstraction. I mean, all art is an abstraction, but it's not an abstraction in the sense of like the Loomis method where or it's not a method. That's the way what I should have said. Not a method in that I draw this, I draw this. It's just having those things in mind, and putting them on the page lets me establish the overall shapes of the head, because that to me in a design standpoint is more important than the individual details most of the time. Maybe the eyes might be, in some scenarios I could see the eyes being more important, but in general the overall shape of the face is the most important thing, and that shape comes from the skull, and understanding that I can wrap the eyes and the other features into that overall shape with some decent confidence. And, I've studied eyes, nose, mouth, lips, all that stuff. I've studied it similarly. So I know those general shapes. I like how you imply the eye sockets first since the eyeballs sit inside of it. Yeah, it helps me. And it gives the shape or the head some structure, helps me keep everything in the right place. Um, all right, we got 5 minutes left. I'll take this all the way to the end because that is how long I said this would be when I made the event. Hopefully this was helpful to you and you'll want to come back for more. Um, for those of you who are on YouTube and not watching this on Discord, you should come to the Discord channel because that way you could subscribe to. Then you'll know when the live streams and other videos come out. But videos are only part of what I do. Um, I'm much more into interacting with people because that's how teaching actually happens in real life. Like if you went to a drawing class and the teacher just put on a bunch of YouTube videos, um, even if they were really good YouTube videos, even if they made the YouTube videos, you'd probably still be kind of disappointed with that class. Um, so I do try to do the same thing as much as I can on the internet. Pretty new at this. I've been doing this online in like a wider form for maybe about 4 months now. I've been teaching in real life since 2019. Well, teaching classes since 2019, tutoring since whew, 2016, I think, and doing like one-on-one tutoring on the internet for a long time too. Still do that. That's yeah. I guess I should plug that. Um, if you want one-on-one guidance in teaching, check out my website. There's also information about it on the Discord. Does the mentorship apply to any kind of art style you might want to drop in to draw in? I think some people tend to be more restrictive with that, like only realism, for example. Um, hmm. How would I phrase this? So I don't teach like realism's not really a style, unless you're talking about the like French painting movement, which I don't think that's what anybody means anymore when they say realism. Like I don't teach style, I teach tools because I don't want to teach people to draw like I do. I want to teach them or give them the tools so they can draw the way that they want to. Like in my animation school class, it's fundamentals. Well, the drawing fundamentals class is the drawing class is fundamentals. The storyboard class that I teach, they kind of do have to draw a certain way because we're using industry uh, conventions. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. I'm open to, and fundamentals apply pretty much across styles. Like if I wanted to do anime or more Western cartoons or like a more painterly style, I would still want to know all of this stuff. I would still want to have all of these tools. Um, I think that's a good place for me to stop talking. I'll throw this open one more time for anybody who has thoughts or questions before I wrap. That was a great lecture. Thank you for the demos. You're very welcome. Thanks for coming. And that goes for everybody else who has been here, has been watching, either on YouTube or the Discord, or if you're watching this in the future. Thank you so much for spending the time and putting your attention here. And I will see you in the next one. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice day.